The Galactic Empire had crushed civilizations far greater than Earth with the same ease a boot crushes an insect. From the moment their warships entered the Sol system, they dismissed humanity as yet another primitive species, barely worth the effort of conquest. Their fleets gleamed with energy shielding and plasma weaponry, while Earth relied on chemical propellants and crude kinetic projectiles. It was laughable. General Zalvok, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Ground Forces, stood in the war room aboard the Eviscerator, watching Earth's surface through a massive display. His reptilian features twisted into something akin to amusement. "They still use tanks," he scoffed. "Machines on treads, firing explosive slugs. It's like watching an insect wield a pebble against a firestorm." His officers chuckled in agreement. The conquest would be swift, a necessary formality before the Empire added yet another resource-rich world to its ever-expanding dominion. He had overseen 100 planetary subjugations, each ending the same way: surrender or annihilation. Earth's fate would be no different. The first wave of the invasion descended upon the planet like a storm. Walkers, towering war machines with shimmering energy shields, stomped through ruined cityscapes. Imperial infantry in sleek, silver armor fanned out, their plasma rifles humming with deadly promise. High above, drone squadrons rained down searing blue death. Resistance was expected, fleeting pockets of desperation that would collapse under the weight of the Empire's technological superiority. The humans fought, of course. They always did. But their rifles were pitiful against energy shielding, their missiles too slow to strike Imperial aerial units with any consistency. Cities fell. Outposts were crushed. The war was over before it had even begun. And yet, something gnawed at Zalvok. A nuisance, an unanticipated inconsistency. Reports filtered in from the outer battle zones. Human resistance was holding longer than expected. There were engagements where Imperial casualties exceeded projections. This was unusual. "Explain," Zalvok demanded as an officer approached. Helmet tucked beneath his arm, face tense. "Sir, our forward units in Sector 17 encountered difficulties." Zalvok's eyes narrowed. "Elaborate." The officer hesitated. "They engaged a human ground force near the remains of a military base. At first, the battle proceeded as expected. The enemy's initial defenses crumbled, but then he swallowed. Then they brought in a tank." The room went silent. "A tank," Zalvok repeated, his voice thick with incredulity. "Yes, sir. An M1 Abrams, based on our data." Murmurs rippled through the command staff. "A relic. The Abrams was over a century old, a fossil of warfare that predated the Empire's arrival in this region of space." Zalvok's upper lip curled. "I failed to see the problem." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "The problem, sir, is that it destroyed an entire battalion." That silenced the room. Zalvok leaned forward, his claws tapping against the display panel. "How?" "Sir, our plasma rifles were ineffective against it. The hull withstood direct hits. It moved unpredictably, using cover, outflanking our walkers. It fired kinetic rounds that punched through our shields." "Impossible," Zalvok snapped. "Yet it happened, sir. We lost 3 more battalions trying to neutralize it. It's still operational." Zalvok's tail twitched in irritation. He had seen planetary forces crumble before energy weapons like dry grass before wildfire. Kinetic slugs should not have been capable of penetrating Imperial shielding. But numbers did not lie. On the battlefield below, the M1 Abrams rumbled to the ruins of a city street, smoke curling from its barrel. The tank commander, Captain Ryan Cole, adjusted his headset, listening to the frantic chatter on the radio. His crew, Harris on the loader, Martinez on the gun, and Johnson on the driver's controls, were grim-faced, focused. A destroyed Imperial walker lay ahead, its burning wreckage illuminating the dust-choked air. The Abrams had taken hits, but its armor held. The crew's adrenaline was high, but so was their determination. "We got another squad moving in," Harris said, peering through a scope. "Looks like a fresh wave." "Let him come," Cole muttered. He keyed his radio. "Command, this is Steel Rain. Confirm multiple Imperial ground forces advancing on our position. Request fire support." Static, then a response. Negative, steel rain. Artillery is offline. You're on your own. Cole exhaled through his nose. Fine, we'll hold. He switched to the internal comms. Martinez, you see those shielded infantry? Lining up the shot now, the gunner responded. The Abrams cannon thundered. A high-explosive round impacted the ground near a squad of silver-armored Imperials, sending bodies flying. Plasma fire rained back, splattering against the tank's hull, but the armor absorbed the brunt of it. Incoming drone squad, Johnson called out, gripping the controls. Cole narrowed his eyes, switched to the .50 cal. Martinez swung the turret, the Abrams machine gun roaring as it shredded the incoming drones. Debris rained from the sky. The Imperials hesitated. This was not the response they had anticipated. Their entire military doctrine had been built around energy-based combat, where kinetic resistance was negligible. But this tank, this obsolete human war machine, was tearing through their ranks like a force of nature. In orbit, Zalvok watched the unfolding battle with a growing sense of unease. His warriors, the finest in the Empire, were faltering against the tank. He turned to his officers, voice low and dangerous. Destroy it. The officers scrambled to comply. Reinforcements were ordered. Heavier walkers were deployed. Bombers were prepped for immediate strikes. Zalvok steepled his fingers, watching as the second wave descended. He did not yet understand how the single machine had become such a problem, but he would. And then he would crush it, on the ground. Cole reloaded, glancing at his crew. They're sending everything they've got at us. Martinez grinned, sweat gleaming on his forehead. Good. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down. The radio crackled with desperate voices. Human forces were dwindling. But Cole knew one thing for certain. As long as his tank was running, Earth was not finished. He adjusted his grip on the controls. Let's give them something to be afraid of. Plasma fire streaked to the ruined cityscape, searing the air with the acrid scent of ozone and burning debris. The M1 Abrams rumbled forward, its treads grinding over shattered asphalt and twisted metal. Inside the steel beast, Captain Ryan Cole listened intently to the chatter over the radio, his grip tightening around the headset as reports of fresh Imperial reinforcements flooded in. Command, this is Steel Rain. We're taking heavy fire. Enemy walkers inbound, multiple squads of infantry, drone support. Requesting airstrike on Grid 39. Over. Static. Then a curt response. Negative. Steel Rain. Air support is tied up north. You're to hold position. Of course we are, Cole muttered. He switched to the internal comms. You hear that, boys? We're the wall. Martinez, hunched over the targeting system, chuckled without humor. Nothing new, Cap. Harris fed another shell into the breach. Let's just hope the wall holds. A kilometer ahead, the Empire's forces regrouped. Their towering walkers advanced with an eerie mechanical grace, energy shields flickering in the dim light of the smoldering city. Silver-clad infantry fanned out, their rifles glowing with a deadly blue hue. Overhead, drones flitted like metallic hornets, scanning for weaknesses, calculating firing solutions. Cole exhaled, steadying himself. The Imperials had learned. No longer overconfident, they advanced with caution, adapting to the Abrams' lethality. That meant this would be a real fight. Martinez, pick your target, Cole ordered. The gunner tracked the lead walker, fingers tightening over the controls. Lining it up, got it. Firing. The tank rocked as the 120mm shell tore through the air, striking the walker's shield with an ear-splitting crack. Sparks cascaded as the barrier buckled before the kinetic round punched through, smashing into the walker's joint. The machine staggered, listing to one side before collapsing with a thunderous crash. Confirmed kill. Harris whooped. The Imperial response was immediate. Plasma bolts rained down, hammering the Abrams armor, leaving molten scars across its hull. A drone squad zipped overhead, unleashing a barrage of micromissiles. Johnson swerved, maneuvering the tank through the wreckage of a collapsed overpass as explosions rocked the ground. We can't take a direct hit from those drones, he yelled. Then we won't, Cole said, Voice calm. Martinez, feed them some 50 caliber love. The gunner spun the turret, the heavy machine gun roaring to life. Armor-piercing tracers lanced through the air, shredding the drones in a hail of fire and shrapnel. One by one, they fell, crashing to ground in smoldering heaps. But the Imperials were relentless. More walkers approached, their shields shimmering with renewed intensity. Infantry squads darted between cover, using ruined buildings and debris to their advantage. They were pressing in, tightening the noose. Cole scanned the battlefield, mind racing. The Abrams was powerful, but not invincible. If the Imperials managed to box them in, sheer numbers would overwhelm them. He keyed his radio again. "Command, this is Steel Rain. Situation critical. We need reinforcements. Repeat, we need reinforcements." A new voice cut in, sharp and urgent. "Steel Rain, this is Hammer Team. We're inbound with armored support. Hold the line." Relief flickered through Cole's chest, but it was short-lived. Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the side of the tank, sending a violent shudder through the hull. Johnson cursed, struggling to keep control. A walker had landed a direct hit. Damage report. Cole barked. Side platings cracked, but were still rolling. Harris called back. Cole's mind worked fast. They needed to break the encirclement before the Imperials closed incompletely. He flicked the comms. "Johnson, get us moving. We're pushing through their line. Martinez, target that lead walker. Harris, load a sabot round. Let's remind these bastards why kinetic energy still matters." The Abrams surged forward, its engine roaring. The Imperials scrambled, firing in a desperate attempt to stop the tank's advance. Plasma bolts slammed into the armor, but the Abrams plowed through, unstoppable. Martinez took aim. The walker loomed ahead, shield glowing like a sapphire wall. He squeezed the trigger. The cannon roared. The sabot round screamed to the battlefield, piercing the shield like paper before slamming into the walker's chest. The explosion that followed was deafening. Fire erupted from the machine's core as it crumpled, its massive form collapsing onto the panicked infantry below. The Imperials wavered, and then the cavalry arrived. From the west, a column of human armor surged forward. Other Abrams tanks, lighter IFEs, and infantry squads pushing in from the flanks. Rockets streaked through the air, slamming into the remaining walkers. The battlefield became a storm of fire and fury. Cole allowed himself a small grin. "Hammer Team, good to see you." A voice crackled over the radio. "Figured you'd need a hand. Let's clean this up." The tide shifted. The Empire, once so confident in its overwhelming superiority, found itself on the defensive. Walkers fell. Infantry scattered. The last drones were shot out of the sky. What had begun as a slaughter had become a rout. Zelvok watched from his command center, his claws digging into the edge of the console. This was unacceptable. This was impossible. He turned to his officers, his voice dangerously low. "Deploy the last wave. All remaining forces. I want that tank destroyed." On the battlefield, Cole watched as the remaining Imperials regrouped. More walkers, more infantry. The Empire was throwing everything it had left into one final push. He took a deep breath. "All right, boys. One last fight." The battlefield was a storm of fire and chaos. Smoke curled into the darkened sky. The scent of burning metal and scorched earth thick in the air. The Imperial forces, battered but unyielding, surged forward in one final, desperate assault. Walkers stomped through the ruins, their massive frames casting eerie shadows against the flickering fires. Infantry squads moved in disciplined formations, their plasma rifles spewing searing bolts of blue energy. Overhead, the last of the drone squadrons cut to the haze, their sleek forms slicing through the sky like predatory birds. Inside the M1 Abrams, Captain Ryan Cole wiped the sweat from his brow, his fingers gripping the controls with white-knuckled determination. They had pushed back the Imperials, sent them reeling, but the fight was far from over. This was it, the Empire's last, frenzied attempt to crush the resistance. "They're not stopping," Harris muttered, reloading another shell into the breech. His voice was tight, exhausted. "They can't afford to," Cole replied. "If they lose here, they lose everything." Martinez adjusted his sights, scanning the battlefield. Two heavy walkers, moving fast. Infantry squads using them as cover. They're learning. They're scared, Johnson added from the driver's seat. They don't want to admit it, but they know we can hurt them. Cole exhaled, steadying himself. Fear was good. Fear made enemies hesitate. But fear could also make them reckless. A voice crackled over the radio. Asterisk Steel Rain Asterisk. This is Hammer Team. We're holding the flanks, but they're throwing everything they have at you. You need to end this. Cole glanced at the burning wreckage around them. Their forces were holding, but barely. The Imperials had chosen their target well. If they could destroy the Abrams, they could shatter human morale in one swift stroke. This wasn't just another engagement. This was the battle that would decide the fate of Earth. Then let's end it, he murmured. Martinez locked onto the nearest walker, the targeting reticle narrowing over its shield emitter. He squeezed the trigger. The cannon roared. The sabot round streaked through the smoke-filled air, slamming into the emitter with pinpoint precision. The walker's shield flared once violently, then died. A split second later, a second round followed, piercing straight through the exposed armor. The walker staggered, its mechanical limbs locking up before it collapsed in a heap of smoldering wreckage. The second walker retaliated, a pulse of energy shot from its main weapon, striking the Abrams squarely in the side. The impact sent a deafening clang through the tank, the interior momentarily flashing with warning lights. Armor's holding, Johnson grunted, but we can't take too many of those. Cole clenched his jaw. One mistake. That was all it would take. The Empire had dismissed kinetic weaponry as obsolete, had laughed at the thought of an ancient tank standing against their advanced war machines. But here now, in the burning ruins of a broken city, the truth was undeniable. A century-old war machine, built with steel and fire, was bringing the Empire to its knees. But they weren't done yet. Cole switched channels on his radio. Command, I need fire support on the enemy's rear line. Their last walker is moving up. Delay it. A moment of static. Then a response. Copy that. Steel Rain. Stand by. In the distance, a pair of missile trails streaked through the sky. Moments later, the ground behind the Imperial forces erupted in a column of fire, sending debris and shattered bodies flying. The advancing infantry wavered, their formation breaking. Cole seized the opportunity. Johnson pushed forward. Martinez finished that walker. The Abrams roared ahead, closing the distance between them and their final target. The walker's shield flickered as it attempted to recover from the shockwave of the explosion. Martinez lined up the shot. The cannon boomed. The sabot round tore through the walker's cockpit, erupting in a violent explosion that sent chunks of metal raining down. The massive war machine groaned, staggered, then collapsed in a heap of flames. For a moment, silence. Then the Imperials broke. Without their walkers, without their heavy support, the last remnants of the Empire's ground forces faltered. Some attempted to fight on, but many threw down their weapons and ran. Others stood frozen, unable to comprehend the reality before them. They had come expecting an easy victory, a swift conquest of an inferior species. Instead, they had been met with resistance they could not overcome. Cole let out a slow breath, his hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline faded. He keyed his radio. Hammer Team, confirm enemy retreat. A voice responded almost instantly. Confirmed. Steel Rain. They're pulling back. We won. We won. The words settled over him like a weight lifting from his chest. They had done it. Against overwhelming odds, against an empire that had never known true defeat, humanity had held the line. From orbit, General Zalvok watched in stunned silence as his forces crumbled. His golden eyes, once burning with certainty, were now wide with something foreign to him. Doubt. This was not how it was supposed to go. The Empire did not lose. The Empire crushed. It conquered. It dominated. And yet, here was Earth, scarred, battered, but defiant. He turned to his officers, his voice a low growl. Order the retreat. One of them hesitated. Sir, if we... Asterisk, now star. The command was given. The surviving Imperial forces were pulled from the battlefield, their warships breaking orbit and vanishing into the void. Humanity had survived. Days later, as Earth's forces regrouped and the dead were honored, stories of the battle spread across the planet. And at the center of every tale was the legend of the Abrams tank, the steel beast that had defied the stars, the relic of war that had humbled an empire. In the years to come, the galaxy would whisper of Earth, of its impossible victory. And in the halls of the Empire, where arrogance had once reigned supreme, there was only silence.